Hello and welcome to the Yoga Teacher Collaborative podcast and the Yoga Teacher Collaborative weekly live show. We are actually pre-recorded today due to some tech challenges in the world of Zoom, but still really delighted to bring you this session. If you are new to either the Yoga Teacher Collaborative Facebook group or to the podcast, I am so delighted that you have found your way here. My name is Laura Green. I am a yoga teacher, a teacher trainer, and a business mentor for yoga teachers with an absolute passion to dive into the depths of everything and anything, even if sometimes, and today is one of those ones, it feels like I just keep swimming down and down and down and down, and I can't get to the bottom no matter how much I swim. But you know what? In those deep dives into the depths of everything, my brain gets tickled. I learn so much. Interesting conversations come up. And this is definitely what today's session is about. So if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know we cover everything from business to things that are going to inspire you as a yoga teacher and continue to upskill, continue to evolve the yoga we love, whilst also really looking at the history, the mythology, the depths, and how we can honor the roots of yoga. So that is the lens we are going with today. We are looking at honoring Sūrya Namaskāra and Chandra Namaskāra, the lunar salute and the sun salutations. And you know, you don't have to be going to yoga very long at all before you hear Sūrya Namaskāra or sun salutations. And these can be a wonderful, empowering sequence of movement that stretch and strengthen your body. But there is a wonderful web of mythology, mantras, history, depths that are behind these salutations, behind these namaskars. And adding that layer in can bring so much heart and soul to your personal practice and to your teaching practice. So that is why I have got the lovely Lauren Gray joining us today. Lauren is an amazing yoga teacher. She has been teaching for a very long time. She teaches on my yoga teacher training, and we host retreats together in England and in India as well. I fell in love with Lauren. Yes, she's a joyful being. You can't be around Lauren and not smile, but I fell in love with her for her brain and her love of history, mythology, learning. She is definitely a soul that dives deep into the ocean with me. And, you know, I think we pull each other up when we get a little lost down there. Lauren has a particular love of mythology and mantra over any, whether it's yoga, whether it's Norse mythology, whether it's Greek mythology. And Lauren has created these amazing card decks, which we will explore more. They're not oracle decks, you know, they're not tarot cards, they are wisdom cards that share wisdom. So she has created one on Chandra Namaskāra and the Chandra mantras, the moon salute, the moon mantras, and one on Sūrya Namaskāra and the Sūrya mantra. So I have invited Lauren to share the wisdom that has inspired these beautiful decks. If you are in the Facebook group or you are watching the podcast with the accompanying video, I'm holding up the decks right here, but I'll leave you some links as well. They are so beautiful, and I'm so inspired to have this conversation. Lauren, welcome to the Yoga Teacher Collaborative podcast. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really great today. I always love talking to you, and then adding on top of that, talking about things that inspire both of us. Yeah, couldn't be better.
So before we get into the depths of it, both of these wisdom decks contain within them the mantras. Some people might know about these mantras, some people might not. So I want to start this conversation at a really basic level. Just let's swim in the surface before we go deeper into the depths. But I'd first like to start by asking you, what is Mantra. If I'd never heard that word before, and to just say on the Sanskrit pronunciation, some of you might be used to hearing this said as mantra. Same thing, mantra, mantra. Mantra is just a closer in the Sanskrit pronunciation. But if I'd never heard the word mantra, what does it mean? What are they?
A mantra is a set incantation, chant that channels not just information. So we're used to language conveying information, but it also has a harmonic motion to it. So with most mantras, when we are speaking these mantras, most of them centuries or more old, we are channeling an ancient wisdom from within, from the cosmos, from our ancestors, that is reverential in tone for an element of nature. So when we look at the Sūrya mantra, it is essentially the same line, just with one word in each line swapped out for another. That is a word that we would look to the sun to and say, oh yeah, I see that. I see that. So Mitraya is the first line in the Sūrya Namaskāra mantra, which means the friend to all. And Mitra, I've actually pre-geeked, have my copy of the Rig Veda here, and Mitra is mentioned in the third mandala of the Rig Veda, written by Vishvamitra, who also wrote the Gayatri mantra. So yeah, did I answer that question?
You answered that question if I came at it with a PhD level understanding. So let's take that back a little bit. Okay, so Sūrya Namaskāra mantra. Yes. So Sūrya is a name of the sun.
Yes.
Namaskar is a practice to bow to the sun. And mantra is, let's use the word words, yes. Words that we can chant out loud or think that contain the energy of the thing we are reverential to.
Yes, yes. So, invocation, it would probably be a really good word. So mantra takes that movement sequence we're all familiar with and vocalizes it, or in our heads allows us to hone what we're thinking about, because our brains can be a bit monkey-y.
Yes, so I can perform the movements of a sun salutation. So again, most of us are very familiar with what a sun salutation is. I can perform those movements in the gym as a warm-up before I go for a run. Not that I go to the gym or run, but I could if I wanted.
You could.
Or I could do those movements in a yoga class whilst thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner or that email I should have sent. Or I can choose to be present by concentrating on my breath, but my monkey mind might still be everywhere else. So then I could take the Sūrya mantra and think that, chant that out loud whilst I do the movements. Yeah, okay, great. And Lauren and I have done that many times together, where I chant and she guides the movements and the other way around. Do you know if anyone would just chant the Sūrya mantra on its own rather than moving? So say I wanted a seated practice to the sun. Could I just chant the Sūrya mantra?
Yeah, I did that while I was writing this deck, actually. So I could connect less to the full physical movement and more to the words. As I said, that Sanskrit mantra chanting doesn't just contain information. It's not a, here's the translation, this is what it means. It's also how you say it. And you know that just as much as anyone else who's studied Sanskrit. You know, you really are pronunciation, because that's a whole other layer to it that makes it extra special. And I actually really enjoyed doing it that way, just the chant.
Yeah, because then you can really concentrate on it. So in the sun salutations, sometimes depending on the teacher, you know, there's 10 movements to sun salutation, sometimes there's 11, sometimes there's 12. How many lines of chant are there for the Sūrya mantra?
12.
12. Okay. And that means if I'm going to put it with movement, I have to do it with a sun salutation that's got 12 movements to it.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you know why there's 12?
12 is an incredibly auspicious number across so many ancient cultures. You said in your amazing introduction that, you know, I love all global mythologies, and 12 is a number that shows up constantly as an incredibly auspicious number. You study astrology, so you know there's 12 zodiacs, there's all of these ideas, and even more modern ideas of kind of Carl Jung's 12 archetypes. 12 is just a fascinating number to us as human beings. So there are lots of variations of Sūrya Namaskāra, and they have got, you know, we have Sūrya Namaskāra A, we have B, we have C, we've got ones that we've invented that are kneeling for people who don't want to do the full up and down. So we've invented lots, but 12 does seem to be across the board the most common. And it's the one that's been sort of immortalized in Delhi airport as well. That's the 12.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's lovely that, you know, there is this tie with astrology. And I think in the Western world, you know, astrology is seen as something quite different and isolated on its own. But within the bedrock of yoga coming from India, there is such a relationship between Vedic astrology, everyday life, sacred living. It's interwoven in many of the Hindu practices now. And I love that, yeah, this idea that there's 12 movements in the sun salutation. There's 12 Sūrya mantras that match the 12 houses of Vedic astrology, and how the sun moves through the 12 houses, it moves through the 12 zodiac signs in a year, and it just makes sense that there's 12. It's beautiful. And then, as you were saying, the Sūrya mantra has a repeatable formula. So it's like Om, word, Namaha.
Yeah.
And then the word that is only the word that changes, which is, as you explained, 12 different names of the sun, or 12 different qualities of the sun. So I guess, did that make it more accessible for you to learn that actually you're only learning 12 Sanskrit words, 12 different names for Surya?
Yeah. Yeah. And linguistically speaking, they're not as difficult as something like the Gayatri mantra, which has its layers of pronunciation and quite tricky parts of language that we don't have in English. We don't have those sorts of things. So yeah, when I was learning that, I was thinking, oh, actually, this is rhythmical. This is quite nice to get into that rhythm, and that middle word, insert name for sun here, is the only thing that changes.
And so have you brought this into your yoga classes, the Surya mantra with the sun salutations?
Yes.
And how do you do that?
So as it first started, there is a great recording by Kai Franz, which you can get on most music streaming platforms. And I would play that, and I would guide people through the movement. And as it has evolved, as people, you know, have been doing it for a good few years now, as people have become more familiar, oh, the Namaha is the word that signifies I have to move from that movement to that movement. As the movement becomes more a part of, more ingrained in how they move, they're then invited to vocalize those lines as well. And I've done it on a day retreat before, where we learned it, we sat, we chanted it, and then all we did was put it with the movement that we've done.
Yeah, because they were already familiar with the movement. Yeah, and I think, you know, it's really good that you mentioned the Kai Franz, because that's how I was first introduced to it, that there's this amazing piece of music on Spotify that's quite modern, it's got quite a strong beat, and it's really fun to do the sun salutations to this Kai Franz chant, and my students absolutely love it. But it actually took me embarrassingly too long to think, oh, I wonder what that mantra is. Oh, I wonder what the significance of it is. And then in hindsight,
you're not alone there.
And in hindsight, I'm like, this is a sacred mantra that was put to some cool, funky, upbeat music that we do our yoga to because it's cool and fun. And I was like, I caught myself in that. And I'm like, I don't think this is okay, Laura. I think you're skipping over the depths of it. It was almost would be like, you know, if someone was Christian hearing the Lord's Prayer in a Zumba class, you know, and I started to feel a little bit uncomfortable with just putting that mantra on, using that recorded version without exploring the meaning of the mantra. And then obviously still sometimes I'll use that Kai France chant and say, this is what it means. Sometimes I'll just chant it and my students flow through. And depending on if it's a retreat or students that are got more time to learn, then we can explore learning the mantra, of course. But do you think it's allowed your students to connect on a deeper level with the sun salutations?
Most definitely. It is that how often would we look at a sunrise and be in utter awe, not have the words to vocalize our awe? For me, this mantra vocalizes the awe that I feel when I'm watching the sunrise. I mean, we've both I'm going to cry, both had a very beautiful experience watching the sunrise over the Himalayan mountain range. And even when I think about that moment in my life, like I get leaky, you know, like I get so emotional. And yeah, when I am writing that, when I'm chanting that, when I'm moving with that, that's the energy I wish to bottle. And this mantra, this movement has bottled that for me, because we don't look at the sunrise in the morning and say, oh, good morning, friend to all. I wish we did. But you know, I wish we did. I wish that was part of our kind of our modern lexicon, but it's not. But this makes it a part of that. So then people come to class, whether it's in the morning, whether it's in the evening, and they're like, oh yeah, I've had a day. I've been lucky for the day. How wonderful is that?
Yeah, and I think that for me has been so important because, you know, I've been teaching a long time and I've noticed a real shift in the last few years of students desiring and seeking more in their yoga practice and seeking more spirituality, more sense of life being sacred. And if you are seeking that, and you want help, you're craving a sense of, oh, I want a more spiritual existence, or I want to experience the sacred. Where is the help for that? Where is the guidance for that? And yoga can be a place for that. And, you know, it can be a place outside of, you know, religious connotations where we can just experience a little bit of something sacred. And I think as yoga teachers, we can really demystify that and go, it's a simple truth. Today the sun rose and I did as well. And it blows my mind when I think about it that, you know, the sun is this burning fireball and that we're on this little round marble spinning in the vastness of space, and that we just happen to be at the perfect distance from the sun for life to be possible. If we were any closer, it'd be too hot. If we were any further away, it would be too cold. We just happen to be the perfect distance. And that blows my tiny mind. And that is a scientific fact. You know, I'm not getting wrapped up in different thoughts of, you know, formalized religion. That is a great straight scientific, and that's worth saying thank you for.
Well, that's it. And I think it was Margaret Burbidge who, in I think it was something like the early 70s, wrote the paper on how the atoms in our body were formed in the heart of a star like our sun. And that is in us, you know, that is in us, that is timeless, that is beyond this form. And it's just culminated together into this form for this lifetime. And how magical is that? We have a little bit of that spark within us. I write that on the first page of the deck, you know, remind yourself of that.
And it's that reverence, reverence of, oh my God, I got so lucky. I won every lottery to have a human life on Earth where life is possible. And it's so short-lived. it's so short-lived. I simply think this with yoga, actually, what with yoga being, you know, God, we can't date things, but 5,000 to 7,000 years old. And I have, if I'm lucky, 80 years to explore it. No wonder that every year that goes past, I realize there's more I don't know about yoga than I do know. And every year I swear I feel like more of a beginner.
Yeah.
But in that grand scheme of things, I have 80 years, if I'm lucky, to dedicate them to my passion that is yoga. And that reverential quality of reminding ourselves life is so short, and that is sacred. And that is aside from organized religion. And if yoga can be a simple place to remind that, of going, hey, it's sunrise today, so did you. Let's say thank you to it. The sun don't care. It's still going to shine tomorrow. But you might not be here tomorrow. So let's say thank you. So that's the Sūrya Wisdom deck, where Lauren has made the most beautiful deck, where there is one card per line of the Sūrya mantra with a beautiful image to help inspire that awe in you, with the mantra written out in the ISAT, with the dots and dashes to help you pronounce it, with a simple translation, and also on the back she's written it phonetically to help you learn the pronunciation as well. And then I know you're just so excited, you just put some bonus ones at the back, didn't you, that weren't even in the 12, like there's more awesome mantras I want to share. Tell me about some of the other ones you've added at the end of this deck.
Well, it was a no-brainer to add the Gayatri mantra because it is the oldest continually chanted mantra that we know of in human history. And its translation, there are a few iterations. I went with my personal favorite of the popular translations. We meditate on the adorable glory of the radiant sun. May our intelligence be ever inspired. And I feel that way, you know. You say, you know, also you're an incredibly intelligent person, you know, hence why we love having these kinds of conversations. But there is that feeling when I learn something, it's like my brain radiates light like the sun. I'm like, oh, proper aha moments. And they're my favorite kind of moments in my fleeting human existence. I also added one for Om, simply because I thought if someone who's just been to a few yoga classes is really taken with it, as I was when I started doing yoga, this could be a really nice way for someone to begin exploring those depths. And you might be like, why does everything start with Om? What does that mean?
Yes. Why is that word so important that we chant it 12 times in this?
Yeah, exactly that. And then I also included the first mantra that I ever learned, which is Asatoma Sadgamaya, which is...
I didn't know that was the first mantra you learned. It's so complicated.
Yeah. It was the first one I ever learned. I actually learned it before I went to go and do my yoga teacher training. So it was quite nice that I had that base of understanding. But lead me from lies to truth, lead me from darkness to light, lead me from mortality to immortality. And again, there's that idea that all of these atoms within us are incredibly ancient and just recycled. So that's the kind of immortality that we can begin to embody, you know, not getting too attached to all of this and being connected to that macrocosm self, that universal timeless self almost.
Okay, so that is one of your two upcoming decks, the Sūrya Wisdom deck. So just to be really clear for anyone listening, that is a deck you can use in your personal practice. That's a deck that you can take into class to just start to drip into your own practice and to your students this more reverential, sacred quality to the sun salutations. You might just chant it on your own. You might add it to the movement to just bring that little bit of depth. And, you know, I'm teaching a yoga teachers retreat this weekend, and on the Saturday morning, we just do a quick half-an-hour practice, which is always the sun salutations with the mantra. So I'm really looking forward to actually taking your deck this time, just to bring in the visuals of it to help remind us of that awe, because, you know, we can't always summon up a beautiful sunrise when we want it, especially living in England. We summon up a cloud rise. So then I love Sūrya mantra, I do. And my brain, and I think your brain, just made the next natural step. I love the sun. but I love the moon. There must be a moon mantra. And I actually remember going to my Sanskrit teacher who taught me the Sūrya mantra and saying, is there a Chandra mantra? And she said, no, not to her knowledge. And I think that is the truth of it, that it's really not very well known. And then I stumbled across it differently looking in a book. I've always got my nose in a book, and I was in the asana, pranayama, mudra, and bandha book from the Bihar school, and I was just flicking through it. As you can see, it's got lots of little tags in it, looking for something else. I don't know what I was looking for. I can't remember. And there it stumbled open on the page that says Chandra mantras. Now, I actually haven't gone any deeper than just going, oh, there is one, because it's written out. It's written with, this has 14 mantras following that same formula of Om, Namaha, and then 14 different words for the moon in there. But it wasn't written in IAST, so it's not got the dots and dashes over it. So I didn't feel confident learning it on my own from the book. And I haven't had a teacher who can teach me the Chandra mantra. So I haven't gone down this rabbit hole. So please take me down the rabbit hole of what took you from Sūrya mantra to Chandra mantra.
It started exactly the same. Well, if there's one for the sun, hopefully there's one for the moon. I actually gave my copy of that book away as well. I'm really gutted. I think I gave it away about 3 or 4 years ago, so I need to get a new one. But it was actually the Chandra wisdom deck that I wrote first, because I thought, well, I know about Sūrya. That's fine. It was the Chandra wisdom deck that was my rabbit hole exploration. I was thinking, I'm going to learn this. I really want to learn the IAST, the transliteration and the pronunciation. So I started writing that down. And often when I write things, it sticks in more.
Yeah.
And then I want to learn the translation. And I think it was a particularly poignant. Did we have a particularly poignant moon at the end of last year, end half of last year, like a super moon eclipse or a lunar? It was something like yeah. It was something like that. And I thought, I really want to do a class on this. I really want to do a class on the moon. I haven't done one for ages. It's not something that I do too often. And then that was what led me down. I was like, I wonder if there is something. And then, yeah, it was the writing of that. It was the writing of the deck that was my rabbit hole, if that makes sense. Every page is from some research, and then that diluted research through my brain blobbed onto the page.
Beautiful. And just, have you got your deck in front of you, your Chandra deck?
Yes.
I would love you just to read me a couple of the Chandra mantras that you particularly like, because there's 14 in this one. There's 12 in the sun. Am I correct? And 14 in the Chandra? Done 14? Yes. Yeah. I wonder why the moon got 2 more than the sun got.
I don't know. I mean, there are more often than not 13 full moons in a year because of the way our Gregorian calendar doesn't quite line up with the lunar phases completely. So I'd get it if there was one extra. Yeah. Be more in line with the lunar calendar. But yeah, that cheeky extra one, I'm yet to find out. I'll let you know if I
just because the moon is so beautiful. 2 more were needed to capture that beauty. I guess. So yeah, tell me some of your favorites from in here.
So I particularly love, I think this one's my favorite. So in our oldest references for the moon in Vedic texts is in the Rig Veda, but it's called Soma, and it's not necessarily exactly the moon. It's not someone saying that's the moon, it's called Soma. Yeah. Soma then obviously becomes this kind of medicinal plant medicine almost. And then Chandra is in, I think, the Puranas. The first time that Chandra is mentioned is in the Puranas. So it's said that the moon is lit up by the sun because it contains soma. So it contains that kind of elixir of life, and that's why it's lit up by the sun, because the sun's like,
beautiful.
this is where all of your magic lives, kind of thing. So yeah. I particularly like this iteration on this card. This is Om, mouthful, Jvala Maliniai Namaha. I bow to the one who guards the flame. And we can see that sometimes when the moon rises and there's this kind of real warmth to it. I also particularly like, again, just this idea, modern mixing with the old. Obviously, we didn't have cameras to do this kind of art many years ago, but this is I bow to the garland of prosperity. And I think when the moon phase is a link, there's lots of photographers that do this now all over my Instagram, and I love it. But it's this idea of all the phases of the moon linked together, making this kind of garland, this linked chain of change, of fluctuation.
And I love that with the astrology, because you said the garland of prosperity. And despite being an astrologer and a lover of all things alternative, I am not someone, I should probably not be saying this on a podcast, I'm not someone who particularly does manifestation practices, because I'm a Bhagavad Gita girl. I'm a girl of non-attachment, and the universe will unfold the path that's right. But I know a lot of manifestation practices obviously coincide with the full moon or the new moon, and this idea of speaking to the moon about that we desire, whispering the moon our wishes. It's that garland of prosperity, that like, tell me your wishes. I am your garland of prosperity. That is just beautiful. So one thing that we kind of haven't spoken about with both the Chandra Namaskāra and the Sūrya Namaskāra, have you been able to find the exact first oldest text where someone wrote it down? Lauren is shaking her head.
Really sadly, there's so many, I think, because there's so many iterations. That's, I think, like, you know, you've said before, you've tried to find the origin of the Sūrya Namaskāra mantra, you get diverted to the Gayatri mantra.
Yeah.
And obviously we know that's old, we know that is written in the Rig Veda, you know. So I think, one, there's potentially not enough information in our little internet box to understand the difference between what we say when we say Surya mantra and Sūrya Namaskāra mantra, potentially, but also so many iterations. In the Vedas, they speak of Sūrya Namaskāra, but it's very much in the, you know, it's not the 12 poses written down with stick men. That's not how it's written down. It's very much, this is how to worship the sun, almost like a yajna, a fire ceremony. It's that kind of worship, rather
ritual offering and worship,
and more collective with a panditji, you know, rather than you in your home space doing these pranams. You do the pranams. Pranams existed, which is what I always say is like the skeleton system of the Sūrya Namaskāra, but the kind of formulaic, this pose, then this pose, then this pose, and back up. Surya is sort of early 20th century.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, some of the wonders of, I always want to go back and cite source. I always want to, and then I go right down a rabbit hole, and I have not been able to find the source for the Surya mantra 12 as written out. But remember that so much was A, oral traditions, B, written on paper that doesn't stand the test of time, and there is an epidemic, and there has been for a long time, of not citing sources.
Yes.
You know, of just not citing sources. So, you know, the Chandra Namaskāra, you know, that I showed you, like, it's written here in this Bihar Bihar book, sorry, that was my doorbell. You know, I have a book here, but the book doesn't cite the source. And I know the book is not the source of it because this book was only published in 1969, but it doesn't cite the source of it. But you know what? When I do go down rabbit holes of trying to find sources, I found interesting tangential rabbit holes that take me somewhere else. And you referenced then about like the small internet box. And I know to many the internet box doesn't seem small, but there's been many a time when I have Googled something that has been yogic or been Sanskrit based, and it still comes up with no results found.
Yeah.
Like, that's the rabbit hole I want to be in when Google's like, no results found.
Yeah. And when you're starting to research that, that's where you go. You get your base information from that quick Google search. And like you say, there are things that are like, no, or it just redirects you to something that's related, but absolutely not where you want to go. Yeah. And then the Chandra, as you said before, there is the Chandra Namaskāra, but I have chosen to do the more modern Chandra Namaskāra movements. This the one that sweeps from side to side across the long edge and from the top to the bottom.
So let's just go back on that to anyone that kind of didn't follow that connection, because we're talking about mantras and movement. So let's go back to the sun salutations. So with the sun salutations, we said there is a sequence of yoga asanas that people are very familiar with that called sun salutations, Sūrya Namaskāra. And then there is the Sūrya mantra, which is 12 chants that can be chanted on their own or laid on top of the movement, that you can chant the mantra as you move. 12 movements, 12 mantras. Then there is Chandra Namaskāra. And again, I am going to confess here, Chandra Namaskāra, my brain, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, went on the same journey of, there is a sequence of movement called sun salutations. I wonder if there's a sequence of movements called the moon salutations. I think I turned to Google, as it couldn't be 20 years ago, but I think I turned to Google and I found the moon salute. And I, at that point, didn't have the integrity to dive deeper into rabbit holes. I was like, oh, cool, there's the moon salute. And I started practicing that moon salute, and then later down the line, teaching that moon salute, presuming it to be ancient. And this is the moon salute, for those of you that know, where you're standing facing the long edge of the mat. It has standing side bend in it. It has trikonasana in it. It has fan pose in it. And it is a lovely sequence of movement. But then in some of my older books, and now I've gone down the rabbit hole, we learned that where did that sequence of movement come from?
The side to side sequence is actually, as far back as I can take it, is the 1980s.
Yeah. Yeah, and out of America, out of Massachusetts, right? Out of the Pali Yoga Center.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So that doesn't diminish its beauty anymore. You know, it's not old. That doesn't diminish its power, its beauty, its effect. It is a beautiful sequence of movement that calms and regulates my energy, that goes through the different phases of the moon. It's beautiful. It's an evolution. Have you found an older form of Chandra Namaskāra that's different?
Yes. So the Chandra Namaskāra that I was originally introduced to was very, very similar to Sūrya Namaskāra in its movement essence.
Yeah.
Movement was from the short edge of the mat at the top to the back, lower down like a pranam, rise back up.
Yeah.
It's
with a lunge, with a low lunge that the arms lift up, and it pretty much looks like the sun salutation.
Yeah, the only difference is that you do it much slower, and there are a couple of extras. So with the lunge, you do pause with the arms down before you lift them up, rather than having that kind of sweeping, rising energy straight back into down dog. And when I was writing these, because realistically these cards, sorry, they're right in front of me, that's why I'm doing this. When I was writing them, I was thinking, well, there is such a difference between Surya energy and movement and Chandra energy and movement. And I actually feel like the garland of prosperity when I'm doing the much more modern 1980s side to side iteration of the Chandra Namaskāra. And I have to say, in my personal practice, I spent a really, really long time diving into the movement, the sensations of the Sūrya and the Chandra. And ultimately, when I was doing the older version of Chandra Namaskāra, it just didn't feel quite the same. So I did make the decision to include the movement of the more modern iteration.
And I think that's really nice because Lauren's cards do include on them a little stick figure of the pose that you would be doing as you do that mantra, as you chant that mantra. So I think what you've done here is really lovely because you've gone, actually, do you know what, this more modern Chandra Namaskāra that in all honesty most people are more familiar with is beautiful. I want to honor it, but actually I want to bring the wisdom and the depth of the Chandra mantra and lay that on top, and it lays on beautifully. And, you know, delving down to cite the source of Chandra mantra is even harder than the Sūrya mantra. And everywhere I found it, the source is not cited. But it's lovely. It's that lovely evolution of how can we honor the evolution of yoga and bring the ancient and the tradition with it and overlap them.
And I think I'd have an issue with it if the Chandra Namaskāra mantra was weird. If it was different, if it was formulated in a different way, but it's formulated in exactly the same way. So even if it is much more modern than the Sūrya Namaskāra mantra accompaniment, it's still insert reverential word for moon here, namaha. You know, it's still following the same formulaic process of I am bowing to this celestial object to embody, to be inspired by its essence.
It's deeply frustrating that if Chandra mantra is more modern, every time I have found it, it has there is same 14 names. So someone has chosen those 14 words as names of the moon. Someone's mind adored the moon in that way. And why can I not find what beautiful being saw and thought of the moon that way and wrote these 14 mantras? If anyone listening to this is able to continue to dive into a rabbit hole and find whose genius mind this came from, we would love to know.
We really would. We really would. Yeah.
Okay. So anything else that you would like to share about these beautiful wisdom decks? There's 2 decks, one for the moon and one for the sun. Anything else you'd like to share about those, lovely? No.
I guess the fact that I have written them with both students of yoga and teachers of yoga in mind. They're not for just teachers, they're not just for students. My hope with creating them is that they offer a source of inspiration for anybody who wants to learn more about these celestial objects which encircle us and we are circling around, and ultimately just bringing that reverential language back to the everyday. Yeah, and if you learn, you know, you could look at these and you could be a novice at yoga, but you could learn the movement, and then you could learn maybe the feelings behind the movement. Why that movement? Oh, because it was a bow to the sun thousands of years ago. And then maybe you learn the line of the mantra, then the meaning of the mantra, then you chant it. It's just this hopefully this journey that you can return back to. And I do include some of the mythological stories as much as I can on a 8 by 14 centimeter card. But you know, stories about Rahu and Ketu, the lunar nodes, and just other elements of the moon and the sun that are very old.
And that's the predominant difference of these being wisdom decks rather than tarot decks or oracle decks. is that it is sharing wisdom. It's sharing the wisdom of mythology. It's sharing the wisdom of the translations. It's sharing the wisdom of the Sanskrit. It's sharing the wisdom of the mantra. It's sharing the wisdom of the movement that might accompany that mantra. So they are like power-packed, full, tiny little cards with so much soul and brain food. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you for discussing this with me and exploring it. I will leave links. If you listen to this on the podcast, we'll put the links in the show notes. If you listen to this on Facebook, we'll put the links in the post on Facebook. Same if you're listening on YouTube, we'll make sure the links are there wherever you find this. And if you can't find the links, just Google Lauren Gray, 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 and that will take you to Lauren's website. And then on there, it has all of her decks. And I am not to blame if you get lost on her website and end up with multiple decks, because you have the Sūrya Mantra deck, you have the Chandra deck, you have the Greek gods and goddesses deck, and you have a Vedic mythology deck as well, don't you? So, you know, go shopping, have fun. I think, do you still have an offer if you buy this moon and the sun one together?
I will do. On the winter solstice, that will be launched.
Yeah. Okay. Well, any questions, just come find us. Lauren Gray, Laura Green, just come find us. And if your brain's like, oh, I want to go and swim in oceans with those two, come swim in oceans with us. We do retreats together. We do trainings together, or come separately and swim in our oceans. Just look up either of our websites. And we will catch you again soon. Oh, Lauren had one more thought. Go for it.
On our websites, we should put, did you mean Lauren Gray? Did you mean Laura Green?
You're in the right place.
A little picture like, is this the one you want to go to?
Do you want the blonde one or the redhead? All right. Thank you so much for listening, my loves, and we will catch you again soon. Bye for now.